Now more with Frank Gaffney.
Welcome back. We are joined by one of my favorite analysts and troublemakers in the battle space of the war of ideas. He is Matthew Vadum. These days he's a senior vice president at the Capital Research Center, which is self-described as America's investigative think tank, and they do a splendid job, in part thanks to Matt's great work. He is a frequent contributor to publications like Front Page Magazine, American Thinker, PJ Media, The Daily Caller, and The American Spectator. He's also an adjunct scholar at the James Madison Institute. And, perhaps most importantly, at least by my lights, he is the author of a terrific book published by the Center for Security Policy Press. It's called Team Jihad: How Sharia Supremacists Collaborate with Leftists to Destroy the United States. It's available for free at securefreedom.org, and we're always delighted to catch up with. Listen, some of the trouble that's being made by people other than you, though you are making book on what they're doing, which is extremely helpful, is coming from an outfit you're familiar with called the Southern Poverty Law Center. Doesn't seem to have much to do with poverty, as best I can tell. Give us the latest on this outfit, who they are, and how much they're worth at the moment, Matt.
Well, I discovered recently, Frank, that the Southern Poverty Law Center, in its last filing with the IRS in the fall, disclosed that it had net assets of close to $500 million. That is $447 million, which is virtually unheard of in the world of political advocacy nonprofits. It's a staggering amount, and you have to wonder, well, is there that much Southern poverty around that they need that kind of money? And I think the answer is a pretty resounding no. They have apparently been raising oodles of money based on their exaggerated accounts of President Trump and his administration, and they're characterizing him as a white supremacist, racist, fascist dictator or would-be dictator. In other words, they've been ginning up all sorts of unfounded fear in order to fill their coffers, and they get the money generally from guilt-ridden liberals, particularly white liberals, who are suckered in by their compelling direct mail letters.
Well, that's a lot of direct mail, for sure. Do we have any indication that big players like, say, George Soros, or maybe Middle Eastern potentates who find it expedient to have an organization like the Southern Poverty Law Center, or as it's called, the SPLC, doing their heavy lifting when it comes to things like defaming people? And by the way, full disclosure, I'm among those that they're defaming. The Center for Security Policy is. I suspect you have been as well. It's not just Donald Trump. They've been going after all manner of people.
You are one of their favorite targets, you and your organization.
Yeah. I'd like to think, Matt, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that there's a correlation between organizations that are effective and their efforts to silence them.
Well, as they say, if you're taking flack, you must be over the target, right?
we are living over the target, that's for sure.
That's right. I don't think Soros has been involved in funding the Southern Poverty Law Center, at least not to any sort of significant extent. They don't really need his money.
Yeah, at this point. But hey, Matt, but the question that recurs, there is almost certainly, especially when a very substantial amount of this money, as best I can tell, is housed in offshore accounts. A possibility that some of it, at least, is coming from people that they don't want to disclose. Not the little old ladies or white people who are sending in, direct mail contributions. What do we know about that?
Yeah. Well, we don't really have proof that the mad mullahs of Iran are sending money or that anybody from Saudi Arabia is sending money. But they do have suspiciously large bank accounts in Bermuda and the British Virgin Islands and the Cayman Islands, as was previously discovered. And they do sock away tens of millions of dollars there. And apparently, Richard Cohen, the president of the Southern Poverty Law Center, was asked about this, and he said, "Oh, it's nothing out of the ordinary for any large corporation. There are tax advantages to putting some money overseas." So he made it out like it was no big deal, that it was just part of normal corporate tax planning, which I find hard to believe since the Southern Poverty Law Center is already exempt from taxes.
Yeah. Matt Vadum, let me ask you, you've written, I think, very thoughtfully and quite informatively about how Sharia supremacists collaborate with leftists to destroy the United States. This is the subtitle of your book, Team Jihad. One of the ways that this red-green axis, as we've come to call it, seems to be operating at the moment is in the service of the IT giants, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Twitters, the YouTubes, I even would say Wikipedia, that are increasingly, manifestly instruments of political warfare being used by the left against people like us. But what role is the Southern Poverty Law Center playing in their efforts to censor or otherwise suppress conservatives?
Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center, Twitter adopted guidelines that seem to have been inspired by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, is a rabid leftist, and he raised a lot of eyebrows recently when he favorably commented on an article that said essentially that we need to have a civil war in America and wipe out conservatives.
That should raise eyebrows.
Yeah, for good reason. And Twitter is dishonest, as most of these big social media giants are. They engage in shadow banning, which is not telling the subject that he or she or it is being suppressed in the search results and not being fully exposed to the public.
And you only find out that you're shadow banned when you see, your followers or the pickup of your pieces dropping off rather dramatically. Is that right?
Yeah, well, dramatically, or you never get up there. Like I suspect I'm shadow banned because I've been on Twitter for like 10 years, regularly contributing to it, and I still have only like 3,000 and something followers. But hey, maybe I'm a lousy marketer. Who knows?
Well, you're an excellent analyst and raconteur of what the problem is, and I suspect it's not an accident, comrade, as the Soviets used to say, that you're not getting the kind of following that you deserve, Matt. One of the things that I think we can increasingly prove is that there is a more and more aggressive effort being made, you mentioned Civil War a moment ago, by a radical leftist group called Antifa. You've done a piece recently about this organization, if I can call it that. Tell us about the origins of Antifa, Matt Vadum.
Well, Antifa is a short form for anti-fascist action, and it's been around in one form or another since Hitler's SA stormtroopers roamed the streets of Weimar Germany. And it's waxed and waned with the times, and these are basically street fighters who would go in and brawl with the people whose politics they didn't like, and shut down their meetings and intimidate them, and did the same things that the Nazis did. So there's kind of counter-Nazis embracing the same, claiming not to be Nazis and to hate the Nazis and the fascists, but yet embracing their tactics, almost to a T. And that's what Antifa is. It's a decentralized, I wouldn't say it's a group, it's a movement. It's like a loose agglomeration of hardcore leftist groups, mostly anarchists and communists and other, militant socialists. They like to don black masks and black outfits. They call that the Black Bloc style. And they caused riots. They stopped Milo Yiannopoulos from speaking at UC Berkeley last year and did a reported $500,000 to the campus and to its environs in Berkeley, California. And they use, whatever violence, whatever means they have available to them to attack people they perceive as fascists. The main problem with that is that with them, the word fascist is really loosely defined, and would include you and me and tens of millions of conservative Republicans across America. So anybody they don't like is a fascist, and they like to beat them up with sticks and Molotov cocktails, and that's their thing.
Well, and unfortunately, it's increasingly our thing in the sense that it is being wielded as, at the very minimum, a threat to enforce the silencing of those they disagree with, and at worst, to actually wreak havoc, as you say, to cause violence and damage and worse.
That's right. And the Islam angle here, the Muslim angle, is that anybody who's in any way skeptical of Islam is called an Islamophobe, like made out to be a terrible bigot. And so you're not even allowed, this is where the thought police function comes in, I would argue, that you're not even allowed to have an honest discussion about Islam because it keeps getting shut down by these people and their allies and their left-wing allies in the media and academia who don't want an honest, frank discussion about Islam and its role in the world.
Well, specifically, I think what the Muslim Brotherhood is doing in the way of this sort of stealthy form of jihad, they can't afford to have that exposed. So, as you say, Matt Vadum, in your book, Team Jihad, and just now, we're watching an unholy alliance, and I mean that in the literal sense of the word, an unholy alliance between those on the hard left, like these Antifa characters, as well as the jihadis, and Sharia supremacists more generally. Matt, your recounting of all of this is incredibly important to the cause of freedom and to helping the rest of us understand what we're up against. And Matt, we'll talk with you again soon. Next up, we will speak with David Goldman about how do we compete with China. That and more right after this.
Go to securefreedomradio.org today. It's your freedom. It's your country. Frank Gaffney's Secure Freedom Radio.